We're so glad you all could join us in our webinar here on enabling DEEP, how states and systems can support practitioner efforts to strengthen dual enrollment. And this is a follow-up webinar to one that CCRC hosted in December on the dual enrollment equity pathways framework for strengthening dual enrollment. So just to give you a preview, we have three presenters. We're releasing a report on this topic today from the College and the High School Alliance, Alex Perry, and Jessica Steiger and myself from CCRC. We'll start off the presentation, overviewing the report, but then we'll get to spend the majority of the time with three excellent panelists from state leaders from Massachusetts, Louisiana, and Kentucky to really dive in and to think about enabling effective dual enrollment programs in their states and across the country. So just again, as an overview, we're going to present this report that's being released today that my colleague Megan will link to in the chat on how states and systems can support practitioner efforts to strengthen dual enrollment. And then we're going to be spending most of the time in a panel in discussion. So we're glad you're here. Welcome, everyone. My name is John Fink. I am a senior research associate at CCRC, leading our work on studying dual enrollment. And I also study transfer there and the connection between high school students aspiring to post-secondary to bachelor's degrees passing through a community college. And I just want to sort of start with some landscape setting here, talking about high school dual enrollment nationally. There's really just kind of 5 points I want to make. First, in terms of terminology, when we talk about dual enrollment, we have a very broad definition of any sort of arrangement where students are taking college courses through a post-secondary partner before they complete high school, sort of everything from the one-off dual enrollment, dual credit, concurrent enrollment course, all the way to including early college high schools and more sort of intensive models. But as many of you are probably aware, dual enrollment in its many shapes and sizes is very widespread nationally, and it's been growing for over 2 decades. And so in the last 10 years, dual enrollment has about doubled. Most of that is happening at community colleges across the country, which this sort of chart shows here. The community colleges are in blue. This only goes through 2021. But even in 2021, there were over 1 million high school students enrolled at community colleges alone. And we know that in the past 2 years since 2021, dual enrollment's been growing at double-digit % increases. And you can see too here in this map of the country, school districts, the darker blue means higher participation rates for dual enrollment. So it's quite widespread geographically across the country, and it's been growing for some time. Now, this is all happening in the context of enrollment declines, especially in the last 10 years in community colleges since the Great Recession, the peak. And then, of course, with the COVID pandemic, community colleges lost almost another 1 million students on top of what was already a pretty strong decline, particularly among older adults. And so what you have is a larger and larger share of headcounts at community colleges are coming from high school dual enrollment. So that's what it looks like for colleges, but for communities, we know that there's an increasing questioning of the value of higher education, despite strong economic research showing that there are good returns to a college degree. But I think many high schoolers are just questioning, is it worth it? Is it too expensive? Is it for me? And the national college going rate has been declining even before the pandemic, but has sort of continued to decline. So we have access challenges and enrollment challenges. And the upside of dual enrollment is really that over these past 20 years of its growth, there's been a real consistent drumbeat of evidence, empirical evidence showing the positive benefits of participating even in 1 or 2 dual enrollment courses on future college enrollment and degree completion. So that's really, what's possible. But we also hear these problems of practice discussed in the field around that these can be programs of privilege, meaning that there's not equal access to dual enrollment, or that they can be random acts of dual enrollment, meaning that there's not a lot of intentional alignment and advising and support for students to think about how these dual enrollment courses can sort of ladder into post-secondary degree programs after high school. But the last thing I'd just share is that although those are generally, the problems of practice in the field, many districts, many colleges are really trying to figure this out, and practitioners are really leading the charge, strengthening dual enrollment as an on-ramp into post-secondary by addressing issues around access and connection to post-secondary. And that's where we started with our report, thinking about the state's role, is by what do we know about effective practices that practitioners are leading to use dual enrollment more as an equitable on-ramp to college degree programs. And so we synthesized research, recent research from a few months ago, as well as a report with our colleagues at the Aspen Institute, the Dual Enrollment Playbook from 3 years ago, around what are effective practices, what do we learn from higher performing community colleges and their school district partners that have broadened access to communities of color and low-income students in dual enrollment, but also have strong matriculation rates into college. And in our first research with the Aspen Institute, we studied these effective partnerships, and we observed that many of the community colleges were implementing guided pathways reforms to really strengthen that connection to college degree programs. And so in our recent research that we published in October on the dual enrollment equity pathways framework, we really looked at what's the connection between guided pathways reforms and effective and equitable dual enrollment practices to not only address the programs of privilege, broadening access, but broaden access to college by connecting students and pulling them into post-secondary by connecting to their interests and tapping into their motivation and aspirations in specific fields for specific degree programs offered by the college, and the sort of advising, the high quality instruction and support, the alignment to college degrees, and also the intensive outreach to underrepresented communities that takes. So in these reports, we documented all these really inspiring efforts happening at that practitioner level. And in the report that we're releasing today, we're really talking about, well, then how can state leaders, college system leaders, how can they enable these effective dual enrollment practices that practitioners are working towards to address these challenges around access and alignment? So before I turn it off to my colleague, Jesse, to overview the reports that we're releasing, because we're talking about this from a state perspective, I do want to share some of what we're hearing on the ground is that there really can be an aligning of incentives between colleges and their K-12 partners towards an approach of dual enrollment that's focused on broadening the pool of college-going students after high school by connecting students in high school to pathways and degree pathways that they're really interested in by basically tapping into their interests, connecting them to a program of study in college. For colleges, a big incentive here is that other than high school enrollments among students have been declining for many years, and there's just a big need to sort of build back enrollments, and that by focusing on dual enrollment as a college access and equity strategy, that can really expand the pool of potential college-going students, as well as bring all of these, great return on college missions around access and more local reputations and local support. And for K-12 schools, we also have been observing similar incentives, that having a strong dual enrollment program that's essentially in many places like a free college program, that's not just a promise, but is connected to students' purpose and their plans for post-secondary. For a high school principal, that is a feather in their cap, something that they can really build up in their community, talk about with their parents, their local parents. In open choice districts, this is helping Title I high schools retain students in their catchment, or even draw in other students and families outside of catchment. And of course, it can tie into the state performance reporting and funding models. So we think that there really is, this isn't just sort of quote unquote the right thing to do for students and communities, but it actually aligns with economic and other incentives for both colleges and K-12 schools, which is, I think, how we get to this conversation about how states can further bring that incentive alignment for both colleges and their K-12 partners. So I'm going to pass it now to my colleague, Jesse Steiger, to overview the report that we're releasing today on how states and systems can support practitioner efforts.
Great, thanks so much, John. So quickly, just want to introduce myself. My name is Jesse Steiger, and I am a senior research assistant here at the Community College Research Center, supporting John's team and research related to dual enrollment and transfer. If you can go to the next slide, please. So before we move into the panel, we wanted to quickly introduce our newly published report titled How States and Systems Can Support Practitioner Efforts to Strengthen Dual Enrollment. And in this report, we really aim to amplify the work and voices of K through 12 and higher education practitioners by providing research-based recommendations for states and systems to strengthen dual enrollment. My colleague Megan has dropped the link, so you can access all of these reports today via the link in the chat. So the report begins by introducing 3 areas of practice that describe how practitioners are working to improve dual enrollment. These 3 areas or practice areas are expanding access to dual enrollment, strengthening dual enrollment as an on-ramp to high opportunity post-secondary pathways, and building and sustaining dual enrollment partnerships between K through 12 leaders and colleges that are grounded in a shared vision emphasizing access, quality, and success. So then moving into our next slide, we want to help states and system consider ways to begin this work. And doing so, we introduce 6 mechanisms to advance dual enrollment across states and systems. Again, really small text on the screen, so using the link, you should be able to see it more closely. And these mechanisms fall into 2 categories that we've defined, which are policy and non-policy. We encourage every state and system. We recognize that every state and system has different political contexts that allow dual enrollment efforts to advance. What you'll find is that we've identified 3 different examples within the policy and non-policy mechanisms. Within policy, we've identified legislation, funding, and regulation, and then within non-policy, resources, engagement, and guidance. And throughout our recommendations, we provide a variety of examples for both policy and non-policy mechanisms to strengthen dual enrollment offerings throughout your state and/or system. And we really wanted to make sure that states and systems had the ability to see non-policy mechanisms from their colleagues across the nation. We also want to acknowledge that these recommendations are not intended to provide solutions to states and systems, but to offer consideration of other successful approaches and mechanisms used by states and systems to enable dual enrollment. So now we're going to start talking about the 3 practice areas in more detail. So in the report, you'll find a total of 11 recommendations across the 3 practice areas. To begin, area 1 is expanding access to dual enrollment. We've defined this as college and K through 12 practitioners taking steps to increase access to dual enrollment opportunities that offer students well-taught college coursework relative to their longer-term goals and that come with the proper support to ensure they succeed. Within this area, our recommendations include setting statewide goals and measuring progress, rethinking eligibility requirements, and reducing tuition and non-tuition costs to students and families through state funding. And within the report, we highlight 10 different examples from states and systems that have directly addressed these recommendations, or this practice area, I should say. But in the interest of time, we're just going to focus on one within practice area 1. And for this, we'll highlight Kentucky's recent work, both policy and non-policy. So in March of 2023, the Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education approved a new dual enrollment attainment goal for the state. This aims to increase the percentage of high school students who complete one dual credit course by the time of graduation to 50% by 2023. And it was really developed with a clear vision of the role that dual credit plays in the state's education system. Similarly, they provided resources. So through a non-policy mechanism, Kentucky's Early Post-Secondary Opportunities Toolkit was published in 2023. And this encourages dual credit practitioners to work collaboratively to provide early interventions and use multiple measures for eligibility. We'll try moving into section area 2, which focuses on recommendations related to strengthening dual enrollment as an on-ramp to high opportunity post-secondary pathways. And how we've conceived of this area is that practitioners commonly use phrases like random acts to describe how a lack of intentionality in dual enrollment course offering limits dual enrollment's potential to improve the high school to college transition. This is a way to address declines in college enrollment and in college going rates among high school graduates. Colleges and their K through 12 partners are redesigning dual enrollment to function more intentionally as an on-ramp to various post-secondary degree options. And within this area, we've included 4 recommendations, those being aligning and promoting credit transfer, prioritizing advising and navigational supports, promoting FAFSA completion before graduation, and providing support to strengthen the quality of instruction. Within this area, we provide 12 sample examples to reference both policy and non-policy mechanisms happening across the nation. But for this section, we want to highlight Ohio's policy and non-policy efforts to strengthen dual enrollment statewide. So Ohio mandated via legislation the College Credit Plus pathways in 2015, outlining a set of courses totaling 15 or 30 credit hours organized by major or career path and professional certification. In addition, Ohio created the Ohio Transfer 36 or OT 36 and the Ohio Guaranteed Transfer Pathways or OGTPs. The OT 36 outlines a set of courses generally satisfying a subset or the entire set of general education requirements for all Ohio public 2- and 4-year institutions. Through the OT 36 and OGTPs, Ohio has created a statewide infrastructure to support students, their counselors, and advisors in developing a plan to ensure that all dual enrollment credits will count towards their post-secondary degree. And similarly, with the implementation of the College Credit Plus program, the Ohio Department of Education provides a variety of resources on their website to support students and families in understanding all of the eligibility requirements. From here, we'll move into our third and final practice area, which is building and sustaining strong partnerships. So how we've conceived of this is college and K through 12 practitioners cannot implement effective dual enrollment programs without developing strong cross-sector partnerships. Effective partnerships are guided by a shared vision for dual enrollment, fueled by partners' commitment and goodwill, and distinguished by partners' success in identifying and resolving challenges. Our recommendations here include aligning college and K through 12 incentives to promote dual enrollment access and success, diversifying and expanding and supporting further credentialing of the instructor pool, maximizing K through 12 and college partnership potential through relationships and communities of practice, and then encouraging a culture of equity in dual enrollment programming. Within this practice area, you'll find 14 various state examples included throughout the report. But for this, we'll briefly highlight some non-policy examples from Louisiana and one policy example from Minnesota. So, the Louisiana Department of Education in 2019 mandated the creation of the Louisiana Dual Enrollment Framework Task Force, which later led to the publishing of the Dual Enrollment Task Force report in 2020. And this was co-published by the Louisiana Department of Education and the Board of Regents. And the report identifies how the two agencies streamline state goals and align incentives by incorporating dual enrollment. And really this is an opportunity to bring key stakeholders together to develop this strategic framework for implementing dual enrollment statewide. And then in Minnesota, through state funding, Minnesota State developed Pathways to 18 in 2018. And this is an opportunity for teachers to earn credentials for concurrent enrollment quickly and affordably. all 7 Minnesota State universities currently participate in Pathways to 18 and offer a variety of programming, including online options and ensuring that teachers have access throughout the school year. So with that summarizes quickly summarizes all of the information in our report. And again, we just want to highlight that this was only a few select examples within our summary. And there are so many other innovative efforts to enable DEEP nationwide. Regardless of your current state dynamics, we provide examples of policy and non-policy mechanisms to make forward progress on dual enrollment. And we really tried to make sure that this report contains something for everyone, with lots of states and system examples across the nation to spark ideas. And in reading through the report, we really encourage practitioners and state and system leaders to engage directly with our accompanying state policymaker strategy development guide, which is also linked on the webpage. And this will help policymakers think critically about the best approaches to advance dual enrollment, given your unique landscape and context. Following the panel, Alex will share more information regarding the guide. But again, that's a quick summary of all of our recently published report. And we're hoping to hear more from all of you about how this is helping the work that you're doing. So with that, I will turn it over to Alex. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, John. Hello, everybody. I'm Alex Perry. I'm one of the co-authors of today's report. I work for an education policy consulting firm called Foresight Law and Policy, but most people know me as the guy who runs the College and High School Alliance, which is a collaborative partnership of organizations that supports policymakers at the national and state level in thinking about how to advance equity, quality, and student success in dual enrollment. And I am thrilled to be joined today by 3 state leaders from 3 different states, demographically, culturally, geographically different, who have been thinking a lot about dual enrollment policy, about the role that this work plays within their state education ecosystems. And I'm thrilled that we had the opportunity to engage with them and hear a little bit about some of the work happening in their state, and some of the sort of like strategies that they're deploying in order to think about how to expand access and success in these programs. Chris Gabrielli is the chair of the Massachusetts Board of Higher Education. Dr. Kim Hunter-Reid is the commissioner for the Louisiana Board of Regents, and Dr. Aaron Thompson is the president of the Kentucky Council of Post-Secondary Education. Please join me, Dr. Reid, Chris, Dr. Thompson. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you very much for making time today. It's a busy time at the start of the year, and we really appreciate you making a bit of time to talk with us and everybody on the phone about dual enrollment policy. I guess I'd like to just start with, for each of you personally, the why, right? Like dual enrollment, you're all very busy state post-secondary leaders. There are lots of things you could be spending your time focused on thinking about how to advance policy related to student access and success in higher education. Why dual enrollment? I mean, I think, you know, there's sort of the charge that like, well, isn't this just for the most academically successful students in a handful of high schools across the state? Why is this something that commissioners, presidents, and chairmen would be spending their time in thinking about? And Dr. Reid, I wonder if we could start with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Alex, for the opportunity. Great to see the panelists and the robust number of participants. And thank you, CCRC, for the report. Why dual enrollment? It's proven it works. And when you're in the business of talent development, you want to go to proven practices. You want to see what is working when it comes to engaging students and making sure that they understand that the high school diploma is the floor, not the ceiling. That we need to help them to think about their path to increased educational attainment while they're in high school, and that there's a place for them. Whether you're interested in pursuing a degree to become a teacher or a cyber expert or a welder or someone who's going to be splicing in broadband, there's a place for you. Dual enrollment is not just for high flyers, it's for everyone. And so I think these messages that there's a place for you, that there's an opportunity to start now, that these are proven practices, I think that's all very important. And then when you talk to students, particularly students from under-resourced communities who have participated in dual enrollment, you hear them say, I never thought college was for me, and I met this faculty member, or my principal told me about this course, and now college went from a maybe to a must. I know exactly what I want to do, or I have a sense of it. I've erased the belief gap, my words, not theirs, that I actually can do college, and I'm on a path to something great. So why not invest when you have that much proven practice, and when you talk to students, it is game changing for them.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. Dr. Thompson, what about you? How do you think about the why behind this work?
Sure, it's fairly easy for me when you think about what we should be doing in higher education, right? We're educating, and we're bringing people to higher learning, right? We're going from what I consider that basic foundation to a higher order of thinking, and then how to create new stuff out in this world based on that. So what do we know? We know we have some control in higher education to build the pipeline. Dual credit is a way of thinking about that, of really systematically building a P20 process with higher education as having very much a primary control. Not about pointing fingers anymore, but getting deep together with our P12 counterparts and creating that by which we need. Also, I'm a big data guy. I do appreciate that people think it's valuable, but we have data here in Kentucky that shows that, people that participate in dual credit, 75% will go on to an institution afterwards, versus we have a college going rate of 47.8%. Those that overall, those that don't participate in dual credit goes on to college about 33%. We know that it's going to take 90% of the folk here in Kentucky to build the economy to have a college credential that matters. But affordability matters here too, right? We know that we can cut it down. And it gives us an opportunity to think about doing that. And I'm proud to say Kentucky, our debt reduction this year was $4,000 in student loans. So I can brag on that. But it's also about this idea that if you can do better alignment, that's what we've done with our new policy, and I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk about that. A better alignment allows them to also see, while they're still in high school, a future that's beyond just where they're at. It also makes that high school graduation, although important, it gives it another oomph to think about and we have to go beyond. But there's a quality element to this. I think it's important for us to understand. It gives us a chance to evaluate students, to see how well they do once they get in college, to know what we need to change here. Continuous improvement model gives us an opportunity to also put some of those higher learning skills that we offer through that process while they're still in, and be prepared to go to college, as we have done with our bridge programming and some of the other work around dual credit. But we also found one other thing, Alex, that I think is important, because I have to mention equity. We found, and we were able to now look at data about college success from those that participated in dual credit. And guess what we found out? We found out those that were underrepresented or under-resourced in the past, especially if they were kids of color, had actually improved greater in college output than any other group by comparison. So you have to understand that we're talking about more than just providing them with the thought of an opportunity. We're truly providing an opportunity. And I can give you a lot more on that, but those are the whys to me.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Thompson. Chair Gabrielli, what about for you?
Yeah, and I appreciate my colleagues doing such a great job of talking about so many of the reasons we're all, I think, pretty fired up about it. For us here in Massachusetts, we're obviously perhaps the most advanced economy in terms of the nature of the kinds of jobs that are available here, especially in the greater Boston area. That's the bulk of the state. We also take pride and think of ourselves as a leader in education, and in particular in higher education, global reputation, although those of us affiliated with Harvard are having a tough couple of weeks here in terms of pride factor. Nonetheless, it's a state that really focuses on that. And when I became chair of the board, I had the advantage of having spent a lot of my career really working on K-12. And what I really noticed was that although both the K-12 silo and the higher ed silo were focused on college success for our students. It was pretty independent play. And the facts were, I'm going to talk about three numbers and I'll stop. One was we were at, nobody really wanted to be honest about and put out forward the fact that if you were Black, Latino, or low income, you're about 20% likely to come out of our high schools to get a college degree within 6 years. If you're white, Asian, or non-low income, which is a wide spread of income, you're over 50% likely. 50, 20. I mean, that's just shameful. And we could spend a lot of time saying were the students sufficiently ready, were the colleges sufficiently, tooled up, but like, how can you live with that? So we said, let's really drill hard on that. And early college was one of the only things, and we focus on early college for our dual enrollment, that actually had randomized trial. I come from a medicine background. It had randomized trial evidence. There's a lot of stuff in education we're trying all the time that has no evidence. We just hope it works. Here he had randomized. So how come we were a 0 on early college? So it was pretty easy to get people to say, let's try it. Two things I want to say about how it's going. Number one, we consistently are showing 15, 16-point increases, now up to about 8,500 students enrolled in the likelihood of going to college and even more importantly, persisting into a second year across all our demographics and so forth. Those are huge gains, much bigger than we get for almost anything else we try. We've got 50 sites around the state that have stepped forward to do it. It's something people are actually willing to do. I've worked on a lot of K-12 education reforms that I like, but the people actually in the school system don't want to do. That's probably not the best idea. How about doing something people really want to do? And the last point I'd make is, and I think this is really important, we looked at our data about achievement in college based on our standardized test called the MCAS, our state test. And across the entire spectrum, when you compare low income and non-low income, and looked at 4-year degree attainment, there was a 20-point gap. So while it's true that students from higher income backgrounds and other more privileged backgrounds often score higher in general, no matter where you were on that spectrum, if you were in the 90th percentile in low income, you were 20 points less likely to graduate college. If you were in the 50th percentile, you were 20 points less likely, and so on. It was always better to be higher scoring, but it was always 20 points gap. So that says it's not actually just about academic readiness, as important as that is. And what I love in our early college data is we've shown that we get the same amount of lift. When we look at 8th grade test scores of our students and ask, does early college help the lowest performing students? Yes, we get 20 points of lift there in the likelihood of being a second-year college student 6 years later. And in the advanced students, many of whom you might say, well, they don't need this. This is a waste of time and money to give them. Now, most of our students are low income of color, but still, among the advanced students in our group, they get a 13-point lift on the likelihood of being a second-year student. So early college works in a different plane than academic readiness. It makes students, I thought, Dr. Reed, you said it really well, Dr. Thompson. I mean, these students, when you talk to them anecdotally, you can't help but see that they now believe in themselves as college students. They've proven to themselves. My colleague likes to say, the best proof that you're ready for college work is succeeding at doing college work. We have a lot of proxies we like, AP exams and test scores and all kinds of readiness measures. How about you just doing it?
I think one of the points that's already starting to come through in these comments is context matters. And so thinking about it from the state policy perspective, your individual state contexts matter and are quite different, right? Chris, you've already outlined a little bit Massachusetts' approach to thinking about its dual enrollment strategy, a little different from Louisiana and from Kentucky, and there are distinct differences in the way that Louisiana and Kentucky have thought about these programs as well. Dr. Thompson, I wanted to start with you this time. I would love just to sort of contextualize the rest of this conversation. Just give me a flavor of the dual credit ecosystem within Kentucky.
Yeah, I'll have to take it back a few years because one of the things we recognized fairly early in Kentucky that dual credit was important, but you had to get everybody on the same page recognizing that it was important. Also, even if it was important, who was it important to and why? And so our policy then, our first policy focused a lot, and we set that policy here at my office, focused a lot on getting people interested in seeing the value in it, especially our campuses, right? And then we had to think about it from a standpoint, what becomes the most, not a word I use often, but a utilitarian way to get people to think about it. What's your return on investment if you do it? We knew we were not going to make money on it, so I couldn't sell that. We knew that, in fact, it was going to be kind of harder to do when we were dealing with a budget that had been decreasing over the many years from the state in higher ed, all of those pieces, right? So we can maybe count pieces of enrollment and so on. So that's our policy focused on what I call, wetting our whistle, priming the pump, getting it going. And it worked pretty good. But then we got the legislature engaged in saying, let's do some dual credit laws that was built like within the policy, and you all put some skin in the game. And so they did. And so that policy, then the second piece of that was getting the legislature to put skin in the game. So we started growing with that. So then about 3 or 4 years ago, we really got more input, more dollars, expanded it from CTE to transfer courses and a variety of things. We also made our community college a statewide footprint. Even though our public and private 4 years, they do a lot of that, but we wanted to make sure a student had in some way access. So access became our biggest movement here. How can we get it throughout Kentucky to get access to every single person? So our policy then focused on that, making our community colleges that place, paying everybody a portion of what the community colleges would get paid. And so there was some return on that investment. Our last policy we just did, which is our most comprehensive policy, was built off of that. Now we had all kinds of data to look at. And I'll give you the numbers here in a little while, but we then now knew that we had to do a better alignment. We had too many students taking courses that did, although it was important, it wasn't synchronized, it wasn't aligned, it didn't lead to anything. And so they were having 12, 15, 24 hours that went to free electives. So it didn't make it more affordable really, right? But the students didn't know. So we had to focus on alignment, we had to focus on advising. We had to focus on actually making sure that more of our low income and our underrepresented populations were getting it. So we did a big focus on that with incentives saying, you have to reach down to these folks in particular to make sure they become a part of it, because they were being left out somewhat. Those that were getting it were the more quote unquote well-informed students. So our policies focused on that, but it also really focused on by the way, now we offer 10 CETE courses that are fully paid for, and we will give you another 4 or 5 courses fully paid for in addition to transfer. And then you can take more at a very low cost rate, or in some cases not. So all of these pieces now has become a primary way for us to think about all those things we're doing. It's now a part of all that we do. And we've got all parties all engaged. Not just our campuses, we got communities. We've got communities setting up scholarships and paying for portions of it. So we went around the state actually spreading the word and getting buy-in with our partnerships. We got the legislature engaged, our governor's office, all of it. So our policy this time was really focused on how we can actually increase the quality, increase the quantity even, but especially for those that were the most underserved.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. And Dr. Reed, Louisiana dual enrollment ecosystem, I mean, that's one that you guys have sort of been doing quite a lot of work over the last couple of years to shepherd. Where does it stand today?
So I would say in many ways, we've followed much of what Kentucky's doing, trying to look to see who's participating, who is not, which is referenced in the report. So we have 32,000 students participating. We too have seen a double-digit increase in participation and an even larger double-digit increase in minority student participation. So when we started on this journey, as was mentioned, legislatively created dual enrollment task force with the right people at the table, we found that it was sort of fits and starts. Maybe it's sort of the Wild West, right? Some students had access, some students at no cost, some students had to pay a textbook or didn't have transportation. It was, some families knew about it, some did not. And so we've tried to move through this process to say, as I mentioned, dual enrollment is for everyone. We set a joint goal with our Department of Education, BESE board, our Board of Elementary and Secondary Education and Regents, to say this should be something that is a high school graduation opportunity for every student. And then we talked about the policies that you see in the report, multiple measures for eligibility as a result of the pandemic, being able to revisit that. Looking at dual enrollment, as Chris mentioned, as an admissions policy, because the best way, as he said, to know whether you can do college credit, to do college is to have earned college credit. And so we've tried to make sure that the policy environment is one where we're removing barriers, we're increasing access, and we're setting an expectation that this will be rigorous, that it will be an opportunity for all, and that we have to have more opportunities than ever before across the state, not just for high flyers, but for all, and to make sure parents and families have access to good information.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. And Chair Gabrielli, as we sort of alluded to, you mentioned this a little bit, Massachusetts has made a specific decision to invest in the early college high school model as its primary state sort of supported mechanism for providing access to high school students to college courses while they're still in high school. I wonder if you could just unpack that a little bit for me, right? In sort of talking about the ecosystem, like talk to me about the impetus behind that decision. I would love to know candidly, how do you think it's going? What are some of the challenges? Because that is a unique and big bet that Massachusetts has made behind this model. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the reasons why.
Absolutely. And you're right, they're contextual. And it's really fascinating to hear my colleagues who are obviously doing some great work in those places. I admire the fact that you've been able to get, for example, more aggressive on goal setting than we have so far. We're trying to play catch up. Alex does this to all of us around the country. He sends what somebody else did, and then he kind of eggs you on to want to catch up. So, yeah, we started with the lowest level of dual enrollment in the country, according to CCRC's, very helpful data sets, because this is a state where middle class, upper middle class, suburban students are mostly taking AP. It's never been a tradition in Massachusetts of people taking dual enrollment. So we had the advantage in the sense of having no complexity. We had very little dual enrollment and no early college to speak of at all. We saw this as an equity issue as our top priority. Our board of higher ed has set the equity gaps as our number one goal, not increasing total attainment, even though we care about that. We already have the highest attainment in the country. We wanted to go at equity. And so this struck me as going right at equity and everyone else involved. We knew, though, that we couldn't copy really the traditional early college that you see around the country that is a standalone school dedicated only to early college where students elect to go there in 6th grade or 8th grade, and stay there for the whole duration. We have a handful of those, but we knew that in our state that people would not want to open a whole bunch of new schools that would be schools of choice. Instead, most of our students are in a program that's within a comprehensive high school. So we kind of sit factually in between what people usually mean by dual enrollment and what people usually mean by early college. We're not as standalone, dedicated, startup new high schools, tiny as early colleges in Texas and North Carolina, a number of other places in New York State often are. And we're not as anyone anywhere can take a course and we got a way it gets paid for, and but there's not a lot of structure around it. We have a lot of guidance around it. You have to apply to the state. One thing we got going really well, I think, as a governance matter, is we decided the two boards would jointly approve the same policy and jointly administer it. So we have a joint standing committee of our two boards with our secretary who set all the policies and approve all the sites. As a functional matter, we run the work through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education because these students are in high school and they're the right people to regulate and administer it day to day, but we jointly make all the policies. We wanted to authorize it site by site because we wanted people to raise their hand and prove to us they had a good partnership, they had a good plan, they had the right number of credits. Some of the things that you talked about, Dr. Thompson, and I think states that are more advanced work on about how well synced up the credits are. We're not where we want to be there yet, but we have the authority to do that by authorizing rather than just saying anybody can go to classes. So we wanted that, and we needed to fund it. In Massachusetts, you got to put the money on the table. So from the beginning, we've been lucky to have the governors and the legislatures let's say we will pay for all the incremental costs of college for all students in designated early college high schools. So we now spend about $25–30 million a year to keep up with both the administrative costs and the credit costs. That grows. It's very good news that it keeps growing. We really wanted to set up a regime to really grow this aggressively with this target. So 2/3 of our students are Black or Latino, about 50% are low income. The vast majority are in schools that are predominantly low income schools. So we're really hitting the students we most wanted to reach. and they're really thriving in it. So we're excited about that. We have a long ways to go. The last thing I'd say is, and I heard this with Dr. Thompson, I'd say this to any state, this is kind of a developmental thing. You got to take it in steps. I really appreciate the way you talked about it. We are thrilled with where we gotten to, and know we got to be a lot better to go to the next level. And I'll leave it with this last point. I think the challenge for all of us is you can go anywhere in the United States now virtually and find at least one school somewhere or one program or 10 that are doing this kind of work with students. But it's still almost always the exception to the rule, particularly for low-income students. If this is good stuff, why is this not the new rule? And that cultural change, and I really appreciated both of you talking about that cultural change, which ironically I'm finding is harder to get the colleges to adopt than the high schools. You'd think the colleges who need more enrollment would be the avid taker-uppers, but culturally, I think it's a tougher shift for them to say, I'm teaching 16-year-olds and they're not on my campus, and I don't even know if they're going to enroll here permanently. That's now part of my mission. Than it is to get high school people to say, I dream of my students succeeding in college and I'm willing to forego high school classes and substitute college classes. That is somewhat surprising, since the incentives would appear to be the financial incentives the other direction. I don't know if that's the same in your all states, but I've been struck by that. Not to say colleges, by the way, haven't been good partners, just to say they have been less chomping at the bit to go after this, and often have had more internal cultural debates about the suitability of this.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard, right? We are working to align K-12 and post-secondary culturally, philosophically, in training and everything, right? Like, what's that? Men are from Mars and women are from Venus. Well, K-12's from Venus and higher ed's from Mars, right? Like there is that sort of, kind of different mentality. And I think anybody who works at the implementation level sees some of those challenges of like, how do you overcome that in order to do the best job that you can for students? And I think some of those challenges are likely reflected at the state level as well. And Dr. Reed, Louisiana Dual Enrollment Task Force has been this initiative that you guys have had underway that has a really significant track record of work product behind it, a statewide web portal, working on the eligibility requirements for the state, looking at getting some money towards doing teacher credentialing, data collection and reporting. I mean, the list really goes on, and it's this product of this sort of collaborative agency K-12 higher ed sort of partnership within the context of this task force. I wonder if there are lots of different examples of these kinds of collaborative mechanisms across the country, but I wonder, like, what's your reflection on why the Louisiana experiment with this has been successful, and for other states that are thinking about doing something similar, how at the sort of state and governance level can we align the different sectors and systems? What advice would you have for them?
So I will say that generally the way to get great work done with urgency is usually not to create a task force, right? It's to get a few people who know what they're doing and like drive the work. But this task force has been phenomenal. It is the right people in terms of policymakers, but practitioners, high school counselor, principal, superintendent. It has the right pace of urgency, and we have a shared vision. And so we're not meeting just to meet. People come, they bring their ideas. We set a series of to-dos, recommendations of things we want to get done, and we work diligently to get those things done. The task force was legislatively created. We started pre-pandemic, visiting various parts of the state so we could not only do the work, but we could hear from the K-12 and university partners around how their models were working on the ground in various communities, and to sort of probe against and get sort of curious about what's working, what's not working, and how do we use that information to inform policy and practice. So you're absolutely right. The task force, we hold ourselves accountable. We have a checklist of things we want to get done. We look each month or two to see how those are doing. And then we have a legislative report due each year. And we meet with our Board of Elementary and Secondary Education and Regents and provide a report to them before it's sent to the legislature. So we try to make sure that we celebrate success. We recognize institutions that are closing equity gaps, but we also say these are things that we still haven't gotten done yet. So I'm jealous about these great guys who have these funding models worked out. We haven't gotten there yet. We have great policy, we have great practice, we have great people, but that's the next horizon for us. But you're absolutely right. The task force has been a great way to drive the work, to hold us accountable, and to bring the right people to the table so that we're doing good work that is meaningful and that will matter on the ground.
And Dr. Thompson, you have talked a little bit about Kentucky's most recent policy revision for dual credit. As part of that, you set a dual credit attainment goal, right? By 2030, 50% of Kentucky high school students will graduate high school having completed a dual credit course and passed it, that's a big vision, right? And you know, it sort of aligns the state behind one goal in thinking about dual credit. A two-part question. Number one, why, right? Like why the goal? What was the impetus and the driving factor for you for doing that? And then part two is sort of the wider what next, right? Like Kentucky, Louisiana, Massachusetts, you all operate under different political, policy, resource constraints in terms of what you can do, what's possible, what's not possible for all kinds of various different reasons. How do you sort of see a goal for the state of Kentucky factoring into all of those conversations about this is how we get stuff done to advance access and success for students?
That's a great question, Alex. It's a big question. I want to partially answer that with some of the questions you asked my colleagues here. Let me first of all say in Kentucky, what we did was when I took over higher ed, I redesigned my organization and created a P12 policy and practice unit that was designed working with K-12. And we found the best person in the state to lead that, Dr. Amanda Ellis. But in the process, we created out of that the Commonwealth Education Continuum that is made up, the chair of that committee is me, the head of K-12, and the lieutenant governor. We have on that group the Senate leadership, the House leadership, someone from the governor's office, and people of policy and those that have a piece of skin in the game, including parents from early childhood through post-secondary. Our whole goal is to look at how we actually make these transitions work till they get a credential in college that matters to go into the workforce. That's part I want to tell you. We have put it into our infrastructure to do this work. And so we've gotten policies, laws. There's some policies we can change we don't need laws for. But we've had those policies on the book for 20 years and not willing to look at it. So we're doing that and we're tearing it down and we're making it work in that sense. So how we got to 60 by 30. Clearly, there's a couple of items that I should mention. By 50% of dual credit, we have a 60 by 30 attainment goal. That's based on data. Proud to say we're now at 55%. We've come a long way in a short amount of time. But we wanted to have that same kind of attainment goal, that North Star, because if everybody has a North Star, we can measure from that. We can set formative and summative metrics to measure from that, and that's what we're doing. So, and everybody has skin in the game with their part in making that happen. We've identified many items that led us to that. Some of the things we knew we had to do was also then think about it from this perspective. In Kentucky, the senior year of high school is basically owned by dual credit now, right? And much of the junior year. That's an important way for us to think about it. By the way, Chris, it may have a little bit to do with people saying, well, they still get paid for us doing that work kind of philosophy, right? You know what I mean? But a part of what we knew is that it was important for us to have that attainment goal with everybody understanding that we're working toward that with them and they had skin in the game. The other point I want to make is they may be able to do a dual credit course and pass it, but there's all kinds of other pieces of the college experience that goes to college success beyond the academic experience, right? So we wanted to create this new, we wanted to make sure that they were getting some social, cultural, and some other items that we need within that college experience. So a lot of our policies are designed to actually, how do we give them some of that experience? How do we align that curriculum again to where they look like they know what they're working for in the courses they're taking. Advising is key here. How do we start that early? We create a Kentucky Advising Academy that post-secondary and K-12, we're working with counselors to do this and many other things. But we had to say more than anything else, Alex, that dual credit is a part of our agenda organizationally, philosophically, in every which way we knew how, because we know that it's a way we're going to do business. We want to do it better than everybody else. A little bit of an arrogant statement, but I'm not, you know what I mean. Let's do it the right way is the point I'm trying to make. The idea that if we have policies then that align to that, whether it's dual credit policies or policies that may exist in K-12 that we have very little to do with. I did want to say, though, we had to get students engaged in this game. So we had to start early to encourage them that they could do the work. And this really was the key for many of our under-resourced populations. We have a very rural area here. I'm from Appalachia. We had to say, no, you can do it too. And this can be a part of what your future is aligned to. But we also had to help counselors know how to reach down and do that. Even getting kids to understand how they can afford college with dual credit as a part of it. So all of that information, whether it's for the old financial literacy statement we used to make now out the window, it's much more comprehensive now. That became very much the way we were looking at our new future.
Thank you all. I would happily continue this conversation for another 4 or 5 hours, but I know that you're all incredibly busy and have 3 o'clock or whatever time it is in your local time zone you have to get to. We're very, very grateful to you for making time. Thank you for your leadership in this space, for each of your states sort of demonstrating the possibilities of what can be done in resource-constrained environments, politically constrained environments, policy-constrained environments, and all of the ways that each of your states have innovatively, invested time, energy, and effort in figuring it out, making it happen, because this is important. We've established that this is important for students, and it's important to get it right and to do the work and find the appropriate mechanisms to do that. And so thank you again for all of your hard work in your individual states and participating to this conversation. Before we wrap, I want to just tell you about one final piece of this overall package, which was alluded to in, well, John mentioned it, which is the State Policy Maker Development Guide. There's the big paper. It's got lots of recommendations in it, lots of examples of what's happening in the various different states. But if you're then interested in thinking about implementing that, how do we take these recommendations and figure out what to do in our own states and our own systems? There is a little guide. It's got a worksheet embedded in it, then a little exercise for you to start working through to think about how do we implement some of these recommendations and practices. And we really recommend, we'd love for you to take a look at it. We'd love for you to try it out, and then we'd love for you to send us your feedback about, was this helpful to you? Has it helped frame your thinking, advance the conversation, and tell us what else we can be providing to help folks think about how to advance this forward. Dr. Thompson, Dr. Reed, Chair Gabrielli, thank you so much. John, I'm going to give you the final word.
Thank you, Alex. I would just want to give another thank you to our panelists. I'd also like to thank the Joyce Foundation for their support of this research, and our program officer, Chibuzo Zegbo, who's been incredibly helpful throughout this project. I'd also like to thank our expert reviewers that provided really helpful feedback on this report. So just as a reminder, the recording and the slides, the reports will all be shared with everyone over email. We appreciate your questions and discussion in the chat. And finally, I'd just like to thank the College of the High School Alliance and Alex for your partnership. And we appreciate everyone's time today on this webinar. Thank you.